sorry. I said hello to the Finns collectively.
I've got a video here.
Good to be here.
Because you have an interesting story to tell as well, and I am also introducing Kay O'Donnell.
Oh, well, I'm born and reared here now.
Yes.
That's the only thing I can
And Bonnie and Bernie, who are very involved in the Titanic story, which is down the end of the street, so we'll be talking a little bit about that. But this is clonbur, so good that they named it 4 times, okay, on Orca, which translates literally as the parish, and that's our first indicator of why this village is here and why it's a slightly more important village in the locality. And I know if somebody from Kernamona or Clonbur might give out about that, but it's because it's the ecclesiastical centre, so the church had a lot to do with the importance of Clonbur. So I'll be talking about Ross Hill a little bit as well. But why do villages get located where they are? You might be astonished to know in 1830 there was about 10 villages around Binlefa of up to 40 houses down at Clonbur. Ballyvian would have had 10 or 15, all at the kind of break-in slope where the hill begins to get steeper, okay? So why did this location, out of all of the available locations, get to be the main village in the locality? So they're all the sort of questions. Any of our younger people have any ideas? Why do people live in places? What do they need to live in a place? Don't know. Hi, Brenda. Toilets. Very good. Brilliant. That's exactly okay. So we need to live comfortably. We need houses, don't we? Yeah.
And toilets.
And toilets. Yeah. But did we have toilets back 100 years ago? No. It'll be
We had
really
buckets.
What?
Buckets.
Buckets. And maybe not even buckets. Okay. But
I'm
anyway.
gonna pee in a bunch of rocks.
Okay, well, yeah, that's what we do as well. I see we're going to have fun. They need food as well. So the very first people, and we're talking about...
Where does your urine go?
What? That's a different lecture. So, people have been living here since Neolithic times. We've very clear evidence of Bronze Age in particular. There is... a Neolithic cairn at the top of Binlefa, and these would have all been important places because when you look at Clonbur on the map, it's more or less equal distance between the 2 Great Lakes. And when Neolithic people were trying to get around the countryside, there was no roads, so the lakes were the highways going back in that period, and that continued through the Bronze Age and right up to the Iron Age and into the early Christian church. So a lot of places are located near rivers. So if we think about Clonbur, right near the crossing point of the Shannon, okay? And a lot of the other big locations are on waterways as well. So that's not by any chance, it's because that was their transport route, okay? No roads. There was probably no roads into Clonbur up to about 1700, okay, so that's whatever, 319 years ago. There was no roads here at all. There was certainly, once you leave this village, there might have been a cart track going out. The ferry bridge didn't exist. That was a ferry, so there was a bridge, there was a boat there to carry people across. So up the area around Finney and Clonbur was quite isolated, okay. Having said that, between 1750 and 1850, there was a massive increase in population from about 2.5–3 million up to 8 million. So just think about whatever we have around the village, which I think when we did the Pride of Place presentation, we had 900 people roughly around here. You can triple that, I'd say, at least living in this locality. So if we take the early Christian church, they positioned themselves at Ross Hill. And any of you have any idea why they might have chosen Ross Hill? Near the lake. Near the lake, of course, again, yeah, easy access. But there's a standing stone very much into the centre part of Ross Hill, okay? It's not an ohm stone, there's no ohm writing, and it has been what we call Christianized. Somebody put a cross on the standing stone, which probably dates back to the Bronze Age. And we've very clear evidence of a lot of Bronze Age population living around here. But if you're an early missionary and you want to try and convert people, invariably they went to the important pagan sites. So Ross Hill was important. I think it's something to do with Binlafe and the shape of Mount Gable from where you stand in the graveyard. Have a look the next time, okay? And so you'll see what I'm talking about. Binlafe has a very female shape, okay, very distinctive, and I think it's something to do with that would have attracted early pagan people. They also worshipped the sun, moon, various other things in nature, so that was important to them. So when you have the early missionaries, and what's amazing about Clonbur, you know, Patrick, if you supposedly looked at all the places that he's supposed to have been, he'd have needed a helicopter, because, you know, but we do have fairly strong evidence that he might have passed through Ross Hill. Ross Hill was quite adjacent to Cong, which was a very important site. We have Champel Foric associated with Ross Hill, as well as Champel Brendan, who is Brendan the Navigator. Okay, and we also have Ulla Foric. Okay, and one of the points that I'm going to make to you that a lot of you have history and knowledge, almost unbeknownst to yourself, and some of those stories you might find weren't incredibly accurate, but I'll give you one example. On the zigzag road crossing up over out of Finney, there's a little almost like an altar up there, and there's an imprint supposedly of St. Patrick's foot on the stone. Now, one of the Kay and people like that will know the Billies. You know, one of the old men that lived down in Glambiog. He started to tell me all about St. Patrick, and I have to say I dismissed it a little bit. I'm kind of like, oh yeah, everything around here is associated with St. Patrick. But funnily, when I did a bit of research in relation to this, I did find an association which is recorded at that site. The Ullaforic, just beside Sandy Bay, is a very other important place. It has rounded stones. It's associated with cursing stones, which again are a pagan. It links back to a pagan faith. So they would come to any location that was important for the pagan people, the people that lived here, anything that was important to them, and then they would Christianize it. Crowpatrick, our holy mountain, was very much a pagan mountain. And then again, it was such an important location. That's why it was very significant for Patrick to go there and convert people. So that brings us to Ross Hill here, and you know, the start of people coming to live. Around small monastic sites like that, you would have almost had a village or a small town developing. Ross Hill was quite small. At Clonmacnoise, that would have been one of our first cities. So you would have had maybe 30,000 people all living around the monastic site. At the monastic site, you'd have had people recording, you'd have metal workers. Some of our earliest metal work that is associated with monastic sites, like the Cross of Cong, for example, if you look at the detail of that, it shows the incredible workmanship. Some of the early metal work, they would find it difficult to replicate today with advanced tools, etching tools, and they had no microscopes and they had no glasses, so the detail of the work that they were doing then. We don't have any metal work or anything of huge importance associated with Ross Hill, but it does indicate that it is an early site. The standing stone is one thing. It has a rounded cashel. When you look from the air, it has a circle around it. And also, if you look at the doorway, it has what they call a trabeated doorway. So in other words, it inclines, it gets narrower towards the top. And that's just, again, an architectural feature of how they attached the doors at that time. So it indicates very, very early Christian. So what I'm going to do next is start heading to the church. We'll pick up some of the features there. I'm going to come back to here because this square is very significant, okay? We have the crane house. Some of our younger people know what a crane house is. Yeah? Because I'm nodding heads. Anybody want to tell me what a crane house is? No, jail, she says. Oh, it's like a jail. Yeah, it does look, and we probably don't celebrate it enough. It does, yes, good man there at the back. Not so much weighing cattle, it was used to hold a scale, and there was a crane attached to hold a scale, and they would have used it to weigh oats and wool. And it gained market status in about 1921 or 22. We've the other key thing that developed Clonbur as a town is that we've had 3 landlord estates. So we have the Petersburg estate where I work, okay, and that is the Lynch family. You have the Ross Hill estate. All that's left of it now is the stable block. But there was another large house in front of that where Patrick Canny has his farmland now. And it was quite a sizable house, probably bigger than Petersburg. And then of course we have Ashford Castle. So before the landlords came, the land was essentially owned by a lot of the Gaelic lords and Anglo-Norman lords. So all around here, Joyces, hence Joyce country, the O'Flahertys and the Burkes would have held land all around here. And then the landlords, after the Cromwellian period, they began to be granted lands. So the Lynches were taken out of Galway and landed out here because you would push the business people and the moneyed and wealthy people out into rural parts and hope probably that they would disappear. The Clements were related to John Brown of the Neil, and that's where they gained a lot of their land. He was a soldier he came here literally to fight against the Irish, and because of that he was granted huge amounts of land. So with the landlords, yes, they have a reputation. There was a lot of local people who were tenants of those different landlords. The landlords did work towards developing the towns and villages, and the Clements family of Ross Hill sought and looked for a license to hold fair days here. And once they got that and gained that license, Clonbur then became the more business town in the locality. So shops and pubs and everything like that would have begun to develop based on that license to hold fair days at certain times. So the fair day process is what really would have, the ecclesiastical site. We've a good location obviously because we're bordering the limestone. You'll always find me mentioning the geology somewhere along the line. Out to the right is all limestone, so it's fairly fertile. Some of this land here, because of the glacial activity, is fairly fertile going back that direction. But the further you go back, it gets less and less fertile. So this is just bordering the fertile lands. You've Cong obviously would also have developed again because of the the good location with the limestone lands and its ecclesiastical heritage with Cong Abbey. Cong didn't have market status, but for example Ballinrobe did. Ballinrobe was one of the first towns in the west of Ireland to be granted market status, and that's why through history it was very, very important locally. It was the main market, aside from small market villages like this, it was the granted status as a market town. So that's why it's important in the locality. The other name that I didn't mention for Fair Hill is also associated with the landlords, okay? For Clonbur is Fair Hill. So we have Ross Anorca to distinguish it from Ross Early, which is in Headford. So it's Ross, the parish. So this was the parish of this, the main centre for the ecclesiastical sort of structure in the area. Fair Hill then comes from James Fair, who was the land agent for the Clements family. Right, for quite a long period, he lived until he was almost 90. Now he's a very interesting record, and one of the reasons why this village is not still called Fair Hill is because some of the antics that he got up to, because it was clear they weren't happy with him as a land agent, that he may have been, I won't say taking money, but certainly doing the good deal for himself. That's the way I'll put it. When they looked for the license, the land agent Clement had to apply for it legally through his solicitor, and it would appear that because, even though the name of the village at that time was Fair Hill, they refused to allow the name be listed as Fair Hill because they were on the outs with Fair, the land agent. So that's the reason today why Clonbur isn't Fair Hill. Okay, you'll see it on loads of maps. Okay, so I was tracing the name. The first time I see Clonbur or Clonbur, Cloonbur, is in 1838 is the first record that I see, but it's the townland down there as opposed to
Here.
just here. Okay, it translates, Cluan is meadow or pasture, and Bur seems to, it's a bit ambiguous, but it seems to refer to the type of glacial deposit or sand that's in the area. So Ankine's field back here was full of sand. These was all to do with the glacier that was up on Ben Leifa, depositing as it carried material from the hillside. It was depositing in drumlins along the way. The islands of Loch Mask are all drumlins, so that's where that name comes from. So there's a significance to everything. I think it's very intriguing as to why the Fair Hill name didn't stick on the area, because I'd say James Fair was very intent. He had it registered and listed. It was on all the maps. William Wilde, who is Oscar Wilde's father, who lived in Cong, he made a map in 1868, and he still listed the location as Fair Hill. So even though it was registered as Market Town well before that. Okay. So as we walk down towards the church, okay, so my plan is to talk about the church. I'm hoping we can go into it. I presume it's open during the day.
It is, yeah.
There is some artifacts that came from Ross Hill, but I just want to show people and talk about them a little bit. We might talk about the Titanic. I also want to mention the woodlands, so we'll go down as far as the car park, and then what we'll do is come back up here, and I'm hoping Kay in particular and anybody else who knows, you know, that this was a shop. The Finns have an interesting story to tell about Lynch's pub. I hope you know some of it anyway, don't you? Yes. So it'll be interactive, lots of questions, comments, if you know something. Lots of people know me and I've been here for a long while, but I still feel a slight bit of a fraud doing the history because I don't know all the local, more modern history in the sort of 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s of the amount of shops. Kay, offhand, how many shops were here?
Yeah, it was 18 or 20, I think it was.
I can imagine 18 or 20 shops here. But even since I came 30 years ago, for example, there was a shop over the way here which a lot of our young folk won't even know. So that's the sort of thing we're going to do. So we'll walk on down to the church. Yeah? All right.